This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and I have big news. Very big news, and I believe it could possibly be the biggest news of the year in rugby union. Here at Rugby Unity, as you know, we are looking at how to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, and we're looking at things on the field and off the field. But to find out that big news, you're going to have to wait, because first of all, we are going to preview Saturday night's big test match in Sydney, sold out at Accor Stadium, 83,000. Ewen, McKenzie, it's been a rough week for the Wallabies. What do you think of the team that Joe Schmidt has picked?
Well, I mean, it's constantly changing. So I gather there's been some late changes in the hooking position. So that might actually work for them. A couple of new faces, Pollard getting a go off the bench. So, yeah, that'll work. Nick White at halfback, I'm not sure tactically. I think they're obviously considering the weather maybe. So I hope they haven't overthought that position, because I don't know what McDermott has to do to get a run. And I would have thought tactically the first half last week gave you some pointers as to how the game might be played. And I would have thought McDermott would have suited that circumstance. So a couple of questions there. But, obviously a bit of turmoil, and there's been a lot of talk about the mental state of the team after the loss last week, which is a bit disappointing. I would have thought they'd be fizzing for this game, just trying to get a win. I mean, if they felt you were close last week, well, you got to be closer this week, so you got to hope that they get themselves up and ready to play. So I'm hoping that's just a smokescreen by Joe in the paper, and actually they're really excited about the game.
So would you like to be seeing more stability in selection?
Well, selection's driven by injuries, obviously, and they seem to be getting injuries during the week, which doesn't help, or we don't know. We only know what we can read in the paper. But I think Tupu coming in as a tight heads, we've been talking about that for a couple of games now. I think that'll be a positive. It actually gives Australia a chance to put some pressure on their scrum. So there's maybe an opportunity there to create some momentum. So I think that's a positive. The hooker situation, I've been there myself. I think I got down to number 9 hooker. Hookers seem to get injured. Eddie's an old hooker. Eddie was durable, but these days hookers get injured every 5 minutes. So, to lose 2 hookers in 1 week is pretty unusual. So, it is injury driven, but there's opportunity there too. Hooper coming into the starting side. I like Hooper. I think he's a really good player. So I think he'll gives them something at line out as well. So, I think the line out possibly might suffer a little bit of cohesion, but Pollard's been there the whole time, so he should be well versed in whatever tactics they've got. I was really impressed with the line out last week, so hopefully they'll start the game well this week.
All right, Eddie Jones, your views on the team that's been selected for Saturday night?
Well, I think, there's a couple of things to look at, and you never have the whole backstory, so you don't know. Firstly, the referee, Georgian referee, again, probably the biggest game he's ever done. But the Georgian referees tend to enjoy the contest, so they enjoy the contest on the ground. They enjoy the contest in the scrum. So Tupou coming in, whether it's by chance, by Alatoa's injury, or by design, it doesn't really matter. He could do a bit of damage early on, and if he gets his confidence up, and he likes playing with Skelton, so he'll be motivated to play well. He could be a potential point of difference there. Nick White's obviously a good kicking half, but are they going to win the game through kicking? Maybe it's going to help them, but I'm not sure that gives them a competitive edge there. The whole thing about, we haven't had a good week. Well, every week, one team has a good week and one team doesn't have a good week. That's every week. So Joe's an experienced coach. He might be just using that, and everyone seems to have bought into that they're down and out. But in fact, they could be bursting at the seams. But the other thing I reckon that needs to be looked at, if they're having so many injuries, why are they having so many injuries? I've got a view on that, which goes back to the total preparation of the team. which has been a long-term thing for Australia now.
Okay, well, give us the view. What is the view?
Oh, I just don't think Australian sides are as fit as they should be. You know, rugby's a game about being super fit. You got to be super fit, and particularly the way the game's played now. Yeah, the ball in play hasn't changed. It's about 35 minutes, but the intensity within the game, as we've seen, you know, one good clean out results in a try, one bad clean out can result in a no try and a turnover and a try to the opposition. And your ability to stay in that contest and be fit and hard is something that you see at the end of games. You know, that comes out in the end of games. And I think if you're losing games consistently in the last period of time, then you've got to be looking at the specific fitness of the team. And maybe since COVID, Australia hasn't gone back to where they should be.
How do you fix it?
Oh, well, it's easy to fix, mate. But you need administrators with, a bit of courage. And I don't know whether Australia's got that at the moment.
Okay, well, just take us through it, though. If you were in charge, if you had the responsibility, what would you be asking for to be able to?
I already tried that, mate. So I don't want to sound like a broken record. But all I'm saying is that if you're losing games in the last 20 minutes of the game, you got to be looking at that. You got to be addressing that. Like that doesn't come about by chance. It happens because you haven't designed your team to be fit enough in that period. Like I experienced it with Australia. You know, we led New Zealand 17-3 in Dunedin and got run down 2017 in the 77th minute of the game. Like there's a history of that. So when you're getting a history and you're getting a pattern of behaviour, there's got to be a cause to it.
All right, Ewen McKenzie, he won't give us the answer. What do you think the answer is?
Well, I don't. Well,
do you agree?
I understand exactly where he's coming from, and I think Australia actually now has control over a couple of the provinces, so they've got, effectively they've got some sort of control over a couple of the provinces in terms of how they have. So that would mean you've got a theoretical 12-month management potential, but there's obviously injuries. There's injuries you get through poor fitness. There's also contact injuries. It looks like Parecki somehow cut the back of his Achilles, is what I read. So you get those unfortunate, and also now you've got these head injuries that seem to be occurring in training as well, which have a time frame attached to them in terms of mandatory recovery. So there are things like that are coming into play, but. I firmly believe, we lost Skelton and Tupu in the World Cup, and had we not lost them, I think it's a different outcome against Fiji and Wales. That's my personal opinion. And so, why you lose them, we never know all the detail, but to lose them in training and not in a game is tough. But at the same time, you're obliged as a coach to try and prepare as best you can and give yourself the best chance to win. So it's a real catch-22, and the rep coaches, so the national coach, literally gets players 2 weeks, maybe 2-week preparation, and suddenly you're playing the All Blacks or you're playing South Africa or something like that. That's what you get. If you're a club, I said this the other week, if you're coaching provincial, you get the players for maybe 6 or 7 months, and some maybe even longer. And the club coach will get them for the whole season. So you just don't have the time to go backtrack and do that base work. So you are relying on players being delivered. And, there's been lots of debate over that for a long period of time. So I think other countries have got a fairly strong national perspective on that. Maybe we're a bit half pregnant on it at the moment, but we've certainly got the power structures in place now to sort of manage 2 of the 4 provinces in terms of the physical outcome, but maybe they need to keep looking at that.
But so the question stands though: do you and McKenzie think that the Australian rugby team is fit enough to win consistently at the international level? Well,
the international level's got a couple of layers in it, right?
Are you going into politics?
Well, I am, because Australia has to front up against South Africa, New Zealand, and of the Lions this year. You don't get we're the easy games. Tell me where the easy test is, where you get, and maybe they're in the middle somewhere. So you got to be able to hit the ground running, and that's the point I'm trying to say. You get 2 weeks, that's it. So the preparation is what it's been, and that's unfortunate if it's not good enough. I'd say, like looking right now, like Skelton looks pretty as fit as I've seen him. So that's a good thing. And he's come out of the French competition. So there's different levels there and different focuses. But I think you can always be fitter. And what we need to do is measure. I think it's probably a good way of doing it. Measure how many injuries we're getting in training, soft tissue, whatever, injuries in training that aren't contact injuries, and using that as some sort of benchmark to make sure that we are pushing the players along enough to make sure that we're getting the durability to be able to play and train. Be able to train to meet the performance you need to play 80 minutes. No good playing like last week. You lose it in the last 10. No good. You got to be able to play through the 80, and in some games you got to play 85 minutes.
Eddie, is that part of the solution?
If I can just add to that, if I can just add to that, Pemby, I think if you look at Australian sporting teams generally, right, that they're always at their best when they're super fit, and that's been part of our identity as a sporting nation. You look at the Kangaroos, Australian cricket. You just go through it. And if you look at the last time we won the World Cup, a bloke called Steve Nance came in and got him super fit, as you know.
Yep.
Got him super fit. Levels above anyone else in the world. And I think that's what we should be aspiring with. So we're not having an argument here whether Australia's not fit enough. It's what they potentially could be. And as Ewen made the good point, they've now got control of 2 of the 4 provinces. So there's an opportunity there for Australia to really go forward in this area. And if you look at the centralised countries in the world, New Zealand, Ireland, Scotland, they don't have these massive problems because they have more control over the players over a 12-month period. And I think what we're speaking about here is not trying to apportion blame about not being fit enough, but an opportunity for Australia going forward that they have sitting in front of them, mate.
Yeah.
Sitting in front of them, they can take it.
All right, so we'll move on.
And super fit doesn't mean you're more skillful, but it gives you an opportunity to be in the right place at the right time, because I think there's also a skill issue as well, where Australia players can be more skilled than they are.
What's your thoughts?
And I think that can come.
What's your thoughts on that skill level, Ewen McKenzie?
I'm a big advocate on the skill side of it. I've always thought that Australia, right through the decades, have always been a skillful side. Their reputation's been as a skillful side, and we've won our magic moments in rugby as a result of skill, playing in a skillful way. I do feel that we've drifted away from that as a focus. I think we're more power focused, which is a function of how you train. But it's easier to try and run over someone. And that works to a certain point. It works in lower grades and whatever, it works. But when you get it to the top level, we've always been able to finesse our way through that. And I'm a big fan. I have these discussions all the time about having a 12 that can distribute, kick and whatever. It's like a second playmaker. I really think that Australian rugby has suffered from that second ball play. And I go right back to the Ella liner and work your way through from there. When you have that combination, that 12 can bring the wingers into the game. It can also take the pressure off the 10. The 10 has to make a lot of decisions during a game, lots of decisions. If you've got a 12 that's is skillful, then that gives you a whole lot more options, and you can swap them around. You can run the same play in reverse with the players reverse, 12 standing at 10, 10 standing at 12, run the same play. But the 12 tends to still have to get across the advantage line. And, I think we've got players like that, but I think we haven't focused on that. So that's just one example of where skill is important. Line out skill, all those other things are still, highly rate players. I'm a big fan of some of the second rows we've got coming through, who are really interesting sort of players. They're really skillful. So I like the skill, and I think that's something we've got to focus on, not just put to one side.
Do you think that are you then suggesting really that Australia needs a national style of play and a national style of development such that those players can be brought through knowing that that is the requirement to play that particular way. And then the provincial teams are then playing towards those outcomes as opposed to, the Force will play a particular way, the Reds might play a particular way.
Well, when I was coming through as a schoolboy, Dick Marks had there was 2 volumes that were produced by Australian Rugby on how to play the game. So they had actually condensed that down into some sort of Australian, and that involved, I guess it was an Australian way, and that's been followed through. Different people have been involved at the ARU level trying to make sure that happened. But we've moved away from that. I guess when the game went professional, each of the provinces went off in different directions and established their own identities. That's been beneficial in some ways, but it hasn't necessarily helped the national team at times, So that's the challenge. Do we have a national way of playing? I personally think that our national method of play needs to involve skill, like a skillful approach. We're going to try and we're never going to be bigger than South Africa, right? So it'd be hard for us to go so let's go out and out-muscle them. But we can definitely outthink them, and we can definitely use skill to beat them. There's no question about that. So that's got to be part of the recipe.
And Eddie Jones, your thoughts, having been a Brumbies coach in a national system and developing a particular style of play, which in many ways was actually applied during that 99 campaign to great effect.
Yeah, I'll just go back and point, the advantage of having a 10-12 that can catch and pass and see space and distribute. We saw that at the end of the game when Andy Farrell came on. For at least 2 plays, Ewen and Finn Russell, who's got more pace than Ewen, changed roles. So Finn Russell came out the back on the second line play and allowed them to get up the field at least twice really quickly because they were able to get around the inside defence, and then had big space on the outside where Kinghorn made a couple of runs and got him outside the 22. So that's the advantage of having players with different skills. I always worry when you talk about style because I think it's rugby's such a nuanced game. Like the difference between Australia kick once more and get 50 metres and maybe they win the game, right? Mm-hmm. Like so there's a nuance about it, but you've got to stand for something. Like if you think about South Africa, what do they stand for? They stand for brutality in defence and a fantastic kick return game, right? So that's
and
their
athleticism.
Rugby. England. Now athleticism. Yeah. That's a new part of their identity. Mm. And then you think about New Zealand, they've always been quite athletic, but they generally play off kick return. Their best, they try to break the game up to play off kick return. So everyone has their style of play. And Australia, as Ewen said, it's always, I think, been an organised team that's then been able to play with skill, but has always been like a physical, in-your-face team. And so how do we develop that style of play if that's the right style of play for Australia? I think is the question.
All right, we'll jump back into...
Pemby, just wanted to allude to Finn Frewen, who obviously writes articles and is a mad statistician involved with Rugby Unity. He wrote a really good article, and he pointed out that in the series to date, Ikitau is playing at 12. He hasn't kicked the ball once. He said Harry Wilson's kicked the ball more times than Ikitau at 12. So that means that we're fairly predictable in terms of, and that puts a lot of pressure on Liner to make all the play and to organise all the play. Now, Ikitau's got a really good left boot, but it hasn't been used in the game plan, and maybe it's just the way the game's evolved, the way the game's played out. But that's just an example of where he's got skills, but they haven't been deployed. But there's a lot in that space for me. I think that's a real area for development potential in Australian rugby, is that the role of the 12 and how he relates to the 10 and working together. We always sit there. We've been sitting there for years now going, who's going to be the 10? Who's going to be the 10? For me, it's about who's going to be the 10 and 12, right? Because those two have to work together, and the skills that those two have can be really deployed really well in attack. There's great opportunities, but also it takes the pressure off each other and their ability to be able to not have to make every decision, share the workload, etc. So I think there's a lot in that space for Australian rugby, and I'd love to see, who the up and coming 12s are that can play at 10. It's always the 10 that can play at 12. I think we really personally, I really think Carter Gordon would have been the ideal 12 for us right now. Carter Gordon would have been a fantastic option for us at 12. He's not with us, but that's
he's in the shower at the Titans, mate.
Yeah, I know. So maybe he'll come back. But if I was playing right now, I'm sure that like Liner, Carter Gordon as a combo would have been really interesting against the Lions.
Interesting.
I think if I just go back on that analysis bit, from a personal coaching point of view, I was looking at it, and 80% of the first half was played on the right-hand side of Australia's field, 80%. So they basically didn't go past the far post, only 20% of the time. I think the two times they did go, once Ikatau made a half break, and the second time was that Ikatau fed Suwali in space and he scored. Now, whether that was by design or it just happened because they kicked off left, it was and because of that, then the Lions were getting most of their possession on the left-hand side of the field, which took away the accuracy of their box kick. You think about Gibson's Park box kick in the first half. Very rarely they got the ball back where they're probably averaging, I don't have the stats of it, maybe 50, 60% of those box kicked back. And I don't think they won one back, which allowed Australia then to build possession and build pressure on the top of that with some good attack. And it goes back to Ewan's point then about Ikatau. If you're playing on the right-hand side of the field, the beauty of having a left-foot kicker to open the game up even more is there, which maybe Australia missed that opportunity.
So if listeners, if you're interested in more of that analysis of Finn Fruin, favourable matchups, jump onto the Substack, the Rugby Unity Substack, and all the data is there to be seen where he's been able to break down the game from last weekend. And Finn publishes every week on the Rugby Unity Substack. So jump across and have a look at that. So listen, before we jump to the Lions, just probably the last thing for me is the composition of the bench. Last week, 6-2. This week, it's a 5-3. Do you read anything into that, Ewen McKenzie?
Well, obviously they got caught out last week, and that's always the risk. But as someone said, it never happens to South Africa. But, yeah, we ended up with the halfback on the wing early in the game. So that's probably part of it. I was disappointed to see Tizano not there. I think it would have been great for him to be back into the fray. I'm not sure if he's injured or what, but he just has disappeared. So
there was some interesting comment from Dylan Peach, who was asked to talk about Carlo and just going to this idea about morale and response. He copped a fair hammering online during the week, and the suggestion was that obviously both from Dylan Peach and from Joe Schmidt that while he's a resilient character, there was the suggestion that particularly the online heat had got on top of him.
Well, don't read it, but for a start, but that it goes with the territory in some respects. I think he's a really tough, resilient player, and that's how he plays the game. And the perfect avenue for him is to get out there and play. I've been advocating for him to be starting. I think he'd be really good in the first part of the game. So I'm disappointed he's not there at all. But Hooper's he's a tough hombre and he's good in the line out. So that's the starting side. On the bench, Nongor coming in, I think that was probably Robertson struggled in the second half at scrum time, so that was probably a change that was possible. Nongor's a very good player, and he's a developing scrummager. So the rest of it's as has been, really. So I don't know if there'll be as much impact there as although with the change in the hooking thing, most are coming on at hooker. He's quite a good ball carrier, so he'll add value. I don't think we've seen enough of Angus Bell. I really feel that I would love to have seen him starting one of these tests. I don't think we've seen the best of him. I think that he hasn't been the impact player. I think he plays well on the front end of games. So I've been disappointed there, but that's, the coaches obviously know more than I do.
Mm. Eddie, any final comments on the Wallabies before we take a look at the Lions?
No, just that they're improving, mate. Bell, I think he's the sort of guy that needs a lot of touches on the ball. He needs to feel like he's loved and be in the game. And maybe playing off the bench doesn't suit his personality. So that's something to consider going forward. I thought Tizano when he came on, and every time I've seen him now, he's impactful around the breakdown. Great clean outs. He's hard on the ball. He's really tough to move. And you got these social media. It's just poison, mate, isn't it? Like, it's literally poison. They call themselves keyboard warriors or the keyboard cowards. Because it's like the old toilet, isn't it? Remember you used to go to the toilet 30 years ago and someone would write on it, Pemby's an idiot, right? And they do that and they thought they were tough, right? Yeah. And now they can do it anytime they want to and someone likes it. And like it's disappointing, but I'd love to see him out there, mate, because I reckon he's a real point of difference. And McWright's been okay, but really hasn't had much presence around the breakdown, whereas Tizano has. So the other thing, if it's going to be wet, then strategy-wise, if you're picking White for kicking, why wouldn't you go 6-2 in the forwards? So I'm not sure about it, which might be a reflection of last week's mishap. But I know the South Africa and England are thinking about going 7-1.
Yeah, right.
It won't be long till they go 8-0, I reckon. And then your hooker will be able to play halfback. Yeah. Your second hooker will be able to play halfback.
Like rugby league.
And I reckon the game's going a bit like that. It's like some certain specialist positions where you got to be able to adapt to it, and then you just need blokes who can go, big bodies who can go.
Well, remember the experience. Jack Knoll, remember you were working him or the idea was to develop him into a player that could play not only on the wing, fullback at a pinch, but also on the side of the scrum back at England.
No. Well, you all remember Radiki Sama. Like, we bought him as a winger, Fijian winger. Ended up playing lock for us at the Brumbies and played test for Australia. Ended up playing test for Australia at lock. He could play both. Yeah. He used to put the garbage out, mate, be missing for 3 days.
That's true. But I tell you another one. If you cast your mind back when Nick Mallett was coaching Italy, I think he picked the flanker at halfback. It didn't go so well. I coached him in France. He's a good guy, but to pick him at halfback, that was. I never contemplated that, but that was very progressive by Nick Mallett. That didn't quite work on the night.
I remember I was actually at that test, and I remember watching their warm up. Nick still trying to teach him during the warm up. So you thought this is gonna be a long 80 minutes for this guy.
It was. Yeah.
And just to it also, Eddie, just to pick up your point about the clowns on social media, they're also into Owen Farrell again. And seriously, I don't know what we can do about it. But, surely.
We just don't read it, mate. You just don't read it.
I know.
There's only one thing. Thing. Like, I haven't read anything for I don't know how long.
Well, that's good.
And so, well, I don't really care, mate, because it doesn't bother me what they say. Because who really cares about flipping idiots that just write what they have an opinion on things? They don't have any fact.
Yeah. No, but look, the Owen Farrell stuff for me in particular, I just can't abide it, because he's been such a champion over such a long period of time and has performed at the highest levels and has confirmed through his performances in this tour that they made the right decision in bringing him out here. That First Nations Pacifica game, outstanding on the weekend. Again, not a long contribution, but a good contribution. And on Saturday night he'll be there again. And when he comes onto the field, it's bad news for the Wallabies because he knows how to win games. So anyway,
it's the same reason that the Wallabies to pick Nick White. Like, I coached Nick White. I mean, he's been around for a long time. You're bringing an experienced player back for a reason.
Yeah.
And they'll be calm in the moment. And then they've played big games before, and Farrell's clearly done plenty of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. I mean, the Keyboard Warriors will be queuing up now, Eddie, after this. So after us on this now. Watch out.
You blokes will have to read it.
One thing I would say is, just before we finish on the Wallabies, is obviously I said the other day about selections have to make sense, sense to the players. And so you've got, obviously with Nick White coming in, Jake Gordon went out. But he went right out. And he didn't. It wasn't like I didn't think he had a bad game. He obviously scored a try, and he's been picked in the first two games, and now he's suddenly out of the team. So when you're sitting there as a player, you have to sort of, and it can be told you're not in the team or you're going to be on the bench or whatever. It has to make sense, and so he suddenly was in there, and now he's out of the team. So I don't know what he's thinking sitting outside the team, and there's been a bit of that in and out from the outside. Whereas when I look at the Lions, they've just been oscillating between the bench and the start, aside from injuries. They're just oscillating within that group. And so that makes sense to players. They get a bit of a go, they get a taste, didn't quite get there, went back to the bench. But to be in and out like that, jumping in and out, makes it very difficult for the players to comprehend, and that's where you can have problems there. So I don't know where they're going to be after this test. You have to think about the next test as well, like where you're going to be against South Africa and who you're going to play in that game. Now, we know Nick White's retiring, so then what does that mean? Gordon comes back in. So then McDermott's sitting there going, how do I get a start? I'm here on the bench all the time, but they keep jumping people in front of me. So it has to make sense to the players. There's got to be some logic. You have to be logical in what you're doing selection-wise. So that's just another thing I'll point out. I don't know what Jake Gordon's thinking at the moment. So,
well, let's jump to the Lions. As you say, a fairly settled team. Low out, Kinghorn in, Ryan in. I think Eddie Jones, you pointed out how well he played last weekend. Chesham to the bench. Ben Earl to the bench. Furlong is playing his 9th consecutive match for the Lions. Outstanding. Maro Itoje, it's his 9th, but 8 starting. He came off the bench in the other match. Ewen McKenzie, your views on the Lions for this weekend?
Well, it's more of the same. I mean, there's just been some subtle changes, but in many ways they've gone back to the first test team. Barring Archie coming in, there was an injury there. But and I think Lowe is really the only sort of form decision there. Lowe's been okay, but they're looking for more from that position. The rest of it's sort of business as usual. Ryan was good, so he gets a reward. And the bench is similar. Genge and Porter have been swapping the whole series. Morgan's still there, so Morgan and Earl later in the game will be good for them. So it's like business as usual, really. I don't think, and obviously Farrell's versatility gives them a really good option there with the 6-2.
It's certainly suggested by the commentary earlier in this week, or the reportage, that the Lions won the series and they had a number of days earlier in the week to enjoy that with their friends, with their families, with their teammates. How do you get the feet back on the ground to win 3-0? Obviously, they've spoken about it all the way through the tour and haven't walked away from that. But how on one end you've got the Australians, you've got to try to bring them up, but on this side of the ledger you've got the Lions, and you've got to try to bring them down to a performance. How would you go about that, Ewen McKenzie, or how would you have done it if you were the coach of the Lions this week?
I think the minute they lost that game to Argentina at the front end, it then became they wanted an undefeated tour. Well, that doesn't happen. So then it'll be about finishing off this part of the tour and then getting a 3-0, which I think it's only happened once before, I think. So historically there's some upside there for them. So They look very cohesive. I think the fact that the selections have gone through, if he'd gone and made a whole bunch of changes and tried to sort of share the love, I think that would have created the wrong environment. What he's done, he's stuck with an inning and he's getting on with business. So he's picked his best side, and he wants to get on with it. And so he's telling the players, we haven't finished, the job's not done yet, and I'm pretty sure that they'll be ready to go. And they'll be disappointed with how they performed in that first half last week. So they'll want to leave a stronger and more indelible memory of the tour by making sure they close this game out and close it out well. And then the tries they scored last week were outstanding, really good quality. But they want to make sure they finish it off and finish, losing the last game, losing the first game, losing the last game just means that they become another Lions team where they can become something a bit more than that if they can get a 3-0 series win.
And that matters? That matters? History matters?
Oh, I think it does. Well, it does to me, but I'm sure it does to these players. I mean, it is an elite. When you've got test teams feeding into another elite team, it's pretty special. And you can see I've seen images of them sitting out on the MCG with chairs in a circle. Like, they're very bonded as a group, and not just the players that played on the field, but the squad members as well. There's a lot of cohesion there, and they want to make sure that they ice it, I think.
Eddie Jones, you've actually had the task with an England team back in 2016. You won the first two, had to bring it home. How do you go about that?
Well, it becomes a one-off match, mate. That's the big difference. And, things that Ewen said, it's how you want to be remembered, because they got an opportunity to do something most Lions side haven't been able to do, and to come to Australia and win 3-0. And you also got to understand just the individual motivation of the players, and the country's motivation. If you think about that, the head coach is English, the captain's English, and they don't like the Australians, mate. Having coached England, we know the other side of the equation's there as well, but they don't like them, mate, and they want it, and because they haven't had a good record in Australia. You look at most teams that have come from England that come to Australia, they haven't had a good record. So to do something special is a massive motivating fact. So they would have rested up early in the week, maybe had one or two good training sessions. Like Andy sent a clear message, boys, this is serious, by picking his best team. If he brought in Pollock and who else, Ben White and some of those guys who have done well, and said go out and have a go, then you're sending a different message. But immediately when you pick your best team and pick it on merit, you're saying this is serious. And Itoje will want to win desperately, mate, because going back to the UK as a 3-0 Lions team, that fancy club that Ewen went to last week, all the aristocrats of. Well, you come back as a 3-0 in Lions, you get the key to those clubs, and there's more benefits for the players, financial benefits, social benefits, status benefits. It's huge, mate. It's huge. I worry about Australia in this game, because I think this is going to be the best Lions performance. I'll be surprised if it's not. Doesn't matter what conditions it is.
So we'll come to predictions a bit later, but perhaps your reflections for both of you as experienced coaches who've coached, for long periods of time. Andy Farrell, as coach of the Lions, you've observed him obviously over his career. You probably both know him personally, but how have your thoughts, or what are your observations of the way that he's managed the team through this tour? Ewen.
Well, I've never met him. And Eddie's talked about him being, Ireland having a very structured approach to the game. So I can see that. But I've also read and picked up along the way that he's a good man manager. A lot of the players speak highly about him. So I think when you've got the Lions environment, where it fell apart when I coached against them, is internal fracturing, with selections and so he's been able to bring the group through. There's been never any talk about that, and that's the biggest risk, I think, is that they have issues within, and so being a long season. So I think his ability to manage the group and get the best out of them, and he's been very consistent. The style of play has been good. Like, it's been an interesting I think they play a really interesting brand of football. So he's been able to get that across in a short space of time. So, I've been impressed with him. I can see how he's successful with Ireland, but I don't know him personally. So I think that he's been a good choice.
When they rolled through Canberra, I caught up, had coffee with David Nusafora, who's obviously the high-performance director on the tour, and he made the point at the time that that's one of Andy Farrell's greatest strengths is his man management and also the selection of the staff. Nussi was saying that he was very clear and very deliberate about getting the right people into the right jobs. And Eddie Jones, forgive me or excuse me, can't remember the lady's name, but she is the manager of the tour, or the logistics and manager of the tour. And that she worked with you at England for some period of time. And as soon as her name was mentioned, or you knew that she was coming, you said exactly the right person for that job. And Nussi was saying exactly that all the way through in all of the key positions, he's got the right people, the people he's got confidence in, the people who'll know that who'll deliver what he needs. And clearly they've been able to do that. So, Eddie Jones, your views on someone who you do know well. You knew him way back in the day in the Saracens when he played for you, but clearly you've spent a bit of time with him over the years and seen him evolve and develop from a very, very, very good player into a fine coach.
Yeah, no. Well, it goes right back to Mark Sinderberry when, as you know, was the Brumby CEO. And he then became the Saracens CEO. And I remember having a conversation with him about he was thinking of signing out Andy from Wigan. Yeah, he was an absolute legend at Wigan. Captain, a loose forward, ended up playing prop in their golden time, and came across to rugby. Had a difficult time because he got injured, and was probably a yard off the pace, but still gave some value. And then I ended up going to Sarries and he was busted then, and we put him on he started coaching, and he always showed like he knew the game. He's one of those guys that played the game, knew the game, good way about him, good personality, good character, and he's done a great job. And I think what you see is a team that's really clear about what they're good at. Their line speed, consistent line speed in defence. They don't contest hard, but they've got people on their feet and they're always coming forward. And in attack, they've got a very simple way of playing, which is very effective with the players they got. They got Richard Wigglesworth from England helping with the attack, and he's done a pretty good job there. Really good job.
It's in Farrell's development. He seemed to be quite patient. That he didn't seem to be in a massive hurry to be a head coach because he obviously knew that he was going to get there. But that he seemed to be quite satisfied sitting in the 2-seat for a while before he actually then got his opportunity, which, I suppose goes to the point of having confidence, isn't it, about that you're ultimately going to get there, and didn't really feel like he needed to rush towards the big jobs. And here we are now with a very accomplished coach standing on the edge of history. So good, well done to him. Congratulations to him. And one other person, perhaps to offer some reflections on, Eddie, is we mentioned Itoje before. His captaincy, you sort of get a bit of a look at it through, obviously the way that he manages the media, both during the week, before the games. You get to see him, through the vignettes that the Lions distribute. So he always looks a very calm, engaging part of the team, but certainly has a way about him in the team that sort of attracts respect. Eddie, you obviously there was that comment that you made in your book all those years ago that you weren't quite sure at that time, but you did say in the book, and you did qualify it, as we've read out on the program in an earlier edition, that, you know, if he did these things, he could be a very, very, very good captain, and clearly he's done those things and gone on to lead Saracens, England, and now the Lions. So you must be impressed with the way Maro Itoje has developed.
Yeah, he's matured nicely, mate. I think he's done really well. And what really impressed me, like early in his career, he was one of those all-action players, wanted to be in everything, and that was his standout quality. And when he couldn't get that, he chased the games, and because he chased the game, he sometimes gave away a fair few penalties. Yeah, and you saw him at the start of the game on last Saturday. He gave away 2 penalties because he couldn't get in the game. So there's no line-out contest. They win the ball at the front, they win the ball at the end, then they go to the middle, and he can't get in the game. But what stood out to me was that, you know, if he wasn't that mature version of himself now, he would have kept chasing the game and kept giving away penalties. But from that moment on, he became very disciplined, led his team well, disciplined himself. Because if you can discipline yourself, you know, you can discipline the rest of the team. Outstanding, mate. Really good.
And your observations from afar, Ewen?
Oh, look, he was obviously a good player when he came onto the scene. Eddie's got far more insight than me, but I've been impressed with his general play. Obviously, he's good in line-out and set piece, but his general play, he's made some telling tackles, and his ability is very athletic in general play around the rucks. So, and the discipline Eddie's talked about, that does show through, because he hasn't been reckless, but he's been very effective. So he's made some, when I say tackling, like a heavy tackles where he'll hit someone and they'll fall, he'll knock them backwards. They're all good signs. He's got good long arms and can get in the way and make problems for the opposition. So he's a good player. I'm not surprised, and clearly a good choice. With a team that's stacked full of Irish players, I think it was probably a really good choice as captain, because it sort of was able to bring, you know, entities together in terms of the group.
The other thing on Itoje, you look at the end of the game, he got 2 turnovers. He got the breakdown turnover and he got the maul turnover to put his team in a position to win the game. And he also reminds me a bit now of Eels at the end of his career. If you remember John Eels at the end of his career, his standout qualities was his leadership and his defensive qualities. Like, he was a great defensive player, Eels, and Itoje is the same as Ewen made. You know, he makes important tackles, and when he tackles, they stop, mate. He stops the ball.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, listen, before we jump out of our Lions Wallabies discussion, always have to ask for a prediction. Ewen McKenzie, what are your thoughts?
I'm thinking, it gets down to Australia's tactics again. Hopefully it doesn't rain. So I'm thinking same as last week. I think it'll be close for a while. I think some of the additions will benefit Australia. But I think the Lions might just be a little bit strong at the end of the game.
And Eddie Jones, you're suggesting that perhaps it might not be as close this week, and that the Lions could run into some form and look out. They want to make history.
Yeah, I think the Lions will come out of the gates really fast this week. They'll want to make a statement early, and cause a good rugby ground to play at. You know, everything's set. They won't have the orientation problems they maybe had last week that Ewen alluded to at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. So I think they'll come out pretty hard, and it'll be up to see whether Australia can stay in the fight. And I think with Skelton there, White's a good competitor. They'll stay in the fight, and if they can stay in the fight long enough, then they might get something in the last 20. But it's difficult for me to see that at the moment.
All right. Well, the only thing we can hope for, I suppose, is another brilliant game of rugby union like we had last weekend in Melbourne, which really, when people ask you about the game and they want to understand it a little bit more, it might be an opportunity to show them. We'll sit down and have a look at that because that was the game at its very, very best. Now, I promised news at the beginning of the program, and it was a story that came out of the Times newspaper from Alex Lowe this week, an exclusive, that Red Bull next week will be announced as the owners of the Newcastle Falcons, the most impactful brand in world sport, the most innovative, the most successful, have decided that rugby union is for them. They are going to buy a team. Perhaps they're buying the worst house on the best street, getting into the Prem. But to me, that is huge news for rugby, to think that Red Bull have made an assessment about the game of rugby union, that they want to compete. Because when you look at what they've done in football, started with a single team. They now have teams in Austria, in Germany, in the USA, in Brazil. Jurgen Klopp is now their head of football. They have the academies. They have all of the facilities. And maybe they will invest in rugby the way they have in football. When you look at what they've done in Formula One, in 2001, they bought Jaguar F1, which was absolutely struggling. And in the intervening period from 2004 to now, they've built the powerhouse, which is the Red Bull racing phenomenon. 8 driving championships, 6 constructors. We could go on, but Ewen McKenzie is someone who takes a real interest in the business of rugby and the business of sport. Are you as excited as I am about this investment in the Newcastle Falcons by Red Bull?
Well, I'd be more excited if they're sponsoring Australian rugby, but given the situation. But it's a toe in it's literally the small toe in the water for them. Newcastle, the English rugby premierships had lots of people come and go, but the one thing about Red Bull is that they make very measured and tactical and long-term investments. So it's a really good sign from that perspective. A toe in the water in rugby. Hopefully that will grow and others will benefit. But they are an impressive sponsor and they do know how to do it. So hopefully Newcastle gets the benefit, but hopefully rugby as a whole might benefit in years to come. But as I say, it'd be better if they were sponsoring the Wallabies right now.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned that there's one of their senior executives who's been around for a long time, a guy by the name of Oliver Mintzlav, who used to be in charge of their football. There was a great quote that I read where he said, Red Bull, we think in generations, not quarters. So I do think that this is the beginning of a long-term plan. I think that they can see the global reach of rugby, and I think that they can see how dramatically underdone we are as a professional sport. We've got to remember that we're only 30 years into this journey, and we are a long, long way away from our potential. And at the moment, you're seeing, even this week alone, you've seen the NBA announce more games overseas. The NFL are trying to get overseas. The big MLB trying to get overseas. Well, we are overseas. That's who we are, and that's what we can do. And I believe that a sponsor like Red Bull, or an owner now like Red Bull, can come in, and they need to be welcomed into the rugby community, into Northeast England. They can clearly see potential up there. They've been involved with Leeds United. So Eddie Jones, as someone who was heavily involved in English rugby, knows a lot about the Prem, knows a lot about Red Bull. I believe you've toured their facilities on a number of occasions. What was your reaction when I sent you the news that Red Bull had decided to invest and to own the Newcastle Falcons?
There's probably a couple of things that strike me. Firstly, they're an outstanding company, and they were involved with England when I was there, and they were energetic. They wanted to get things done, but rugby sort of kept them at a distance to a large extent because they want to get things done quickly, and it's hard to get things done quickly in rugby. You just think about most competitions in the world. They don't have a commission. they have 10, and England's the same. I think they have 10 club owners. So for something to happen to the competition, the 10 have to agree to it. And that's an unwieldy decision-making process. So it's good to have them on board. The second thing is, I don't know how well they've done in football. I know they've had success in Austria, but the most of their teams, from my perception, have struggled a little bit because it's a much more difficult, like soccer and rugby are much more difficult games to build, whereas F1, you put money in, you can buy the best people almost immediately and you can get results, and the table in F1 is almost is the very high correlation to investment, whereas rugby and football's not. You can invest and still be unsuccessful. So, it's great they're in the competition in rugby and hopefully they'll stick at it.
Well,
but they're going to have to rip off some leather patches, mate.
Well, I'm sure they will, and I do think that they will come with energy. I think they'll come with their approach, their content-led approach, their story-led approach, the innovation, the energy that they bring. Because I think the other side of this is that given that Red Bull have now invested in the Prem, I just wonder what that means for R360. Eddie Jones, have you got any updates, given that it was 56 days ago that James Haskell went on to the good, the bad, the rugby and told us to wait there. We're just about to tell you all about it. We're just about to give you the good news. Can you, anyone whispering in your ear from the corners, any updates from R360?
Oh, it's still on the go, mate. And they've been pretty active during the Lions series. I know, talking to players. There was a report that Ryan Pappenhausen,
yes,
has met with them, and I think they're still on the go, mate. They haven't gone away. They're still there.
I did notice that the Saudi Arabia investment fund said, no, we're not an investor. So that sovereign wealth fund for Saudi Arabia, they have come out publicly and said they are not an investor in R360. But anyway, 56 days, we can probably wait a few more for that. So listen, thank you, gentlemen. Eddie Jones, I believe that you are on your way to the USA to get ready for the Pacific Nations Championship. Is that correct?
Just off for a recce tour for a week, mate.
Oh, recce tour. Okay. So you're not...
Yeah.
Okay.
On the road. Yeah.
Very good. Okay. What are you looking for? When you go on those recce tours, what are the sorts of things that you're looking for?
Well, mate, it's P&C, so it's pretty basic. But
what's P&C stand for?
Their trial... Pacific Nations Cup.
Oh, yeah.
I know they're looking to trial potential grounds for the World Cup in 2031. So it'll be interesting to see the stadiums and the training set up in the cities. We've been there before, and it's been pretty basic. Not equipped for international teams. So it'll be interesting to see if they've made some improvements in that area. I remember we played last time. We played in those old. Like festival, what do they call them? Festival grounds, showgrounds. We played in the showgrounds last time. It was pretty basic, no dressing room.
No dress.
That was
no
before the 2015 World Cup. So, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think, the build towards the 2031 World Cup, someone pointed out to me the other day that I keep talking about 2031 and I keep ignoring 2027. I'm not going to ignore 2027. I'm looking forward to 2025 in England at the Women's World Cup, which is coming up. But for you, Ewen and McKenzie, what's on the... Actually, we do have a question from someone wants to know, Ewen, when are you coming back? When are you taking a role back in rugby union? That was one of the questions that we got.
I'm here. This is my
this very large contract that you're on with Rugby Unity exclusively.
I'm doing 2 hours a week, so in amongst other things. So that's
okay.
That's as back as I'll be.
No thoughts to no thoughts. No, not anywhere with you. Not at the moment. Anyway, we might be able to. We might be able to convince you as we go through some just other news. Just for Rugby Unity, we've hit 1 million impressions on YouTube. So to you, the audience, thank you so much. And here's some more feedback from the audience. Great to hear real qualified opinions. Last week, ref had a really good game. The Aussies should have closed out the game with an 18-point lead. Jonesy Jones says, watching this from the UK, and I have to say this is a quality show with informed, knowledgeable and unbiased inputs. And a final one from Amit Prasad, great analysis and refreshing to hear some more objective opinions. McKenzie is fantastic, really insightful and tactical analysis. And actually, I'll add Ewen one more for him. You think says, Ewen starting to freely express himself now. Good to see. Always great opinions and advice, but really good to see him jumping in without being prompted. His love of rugby certainly is still there. Come back, mate. We miss you. So that's from You Think. So listen, thank you.
Don't listen to it, Link. Don't listen to it, mate. It's poison.
I'm not listening,
mate.
Poison. You just need to keep watching this.
The siren call is dragging him back into the game. Anyway, there we go. So listen, boys, thank you so much for giving up some of your time again for us this week. Just remember, everybody, the Substack is there at Rugby Unity. The guys have referred to the work of Finn Fruin at Favourable Matchup. Some great analysis to look there. I've written some more columns this week. There's lots of other data there. There is the guide to Sydney for this weekend. Grab that if you're going to be in Sydney. But just engage, please, and let us know. And if you could subscribe, that really does help us to be found by others. And a big thanks to YouTube for juicing us up and getting us out to so many people. 1 million impressions in under 12 weeks. That's pretty handy. So anyway, a great chat today. Look forward to the wrap-up on Monday of the big test match on the weekend. Great news about Red Bull. But for the moment, everybody, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.